Chair, just without putting too fine a point on the issue of the Waikato River Authority and moving away from the 5 statutory board model, it needs to be noted that there were extensive consultations with a number of iwi along the river with regards to what would be the best management approach for the Waikato River, and it was indeed, in fact, upon a lot of the feedback from those consultations and from those iwi that the statutory board model was presented at the time. Notwithstanding that, it is important again to recognise that the co-management framework really applies from the karapiro down, and that there are distinct variances or differences between the concerns, the priorities of the upper catchment of the Waikato vis-a-vis the lower catchment. But everyone, each iwi alongside the whole of the river, recognise that if we're going to do it well, we all need to be involved in it. So I put on the record that that statutory board model actually recognised some of the peculiarities of iwi relationships, and I guess Waikato not wanting to impose something for upper iwi which may not reconcile with their priorities and their imperatives. So that's that point. I did want to also relate some comment to the member for ACT. And people shouldn't be discouraged by the views presented by ACT on this particular issue. They voted for the first reading, and then they saw that they couldn't digest the progression with which and the progress with which this settlement was going, and they've now since said that they're not going to support it. But on the points of history, I, none then other, am so pleased that Mr Garrett has taken up the challenge of learning some of New Zealand's Māori history. But in terms of the treaty settlement history, as it relates to Waikato-Tainui, that contribution needs to be considered quite strongly alongside another discourse, and that is that this settlement is preceded by the Waikato-Raupatu Claims Settlement Act, and in that Act there is an extensive history contained in there which details references to the SIM Commission. And that needs to be made because there was no intention at all by simplifying, if you like, a preamble in the river settlement to get away from the facts. The facts remain that the injustice of Raupatu that affected Waikato-Tainui were clearly supported by the SIM Commission, and they were illegal and unjust. And that was clearly stated with reference to the Raupatu settlement. But the history, I think, of and the context for why this settlement is constructed the way that it is clearly is cross-referenced to the previous settlement that was reached in 1995. Mr Garrett went on to recognise the role of Princess Tapuia, and one of the things that have been very clear in the Kingitanga experience is that political relationships and alliances had their time, had their place and purpose, and did achieve outcomes along the way. Indeed, it was a result of some very strong political alliances at the time between Te Puia and Ngata and various politicians of the day that much progress was made. Indeed, under the progression of the development of lands and the like. But can I say this to Mr Garrett? He forgets that in terms of the treaty settlement history, it wasn't until 1975 when a Labour government established the Waitangi Tribunal where claims could be heard that we started to get the ability for these types of issues and claims to be aired in the public light, because we were failed by history. Many iwi will tell that story. In 1985, when again a Labour government made those claims retrospective, you had claims like this coming to the fore. And I made the point in the second reading speech that it wasn't until 1987 when my father, Tainui Māori Trust Board and Ngā Marae Tōpu lodged a statement of claim for the Waikato River that this type of historical breach could actually be aired and given its true place in history to be rectified, and that is being done today. This is a dynamic and evolving opportunity, not only for Waikato-Tainui, but for the nation, to say that we want to go in a different way when it comes to looking at resource management of our taonga, our waterways. And we're not afraid to be able to present that with all its challenges in this settlement and bring it to the House, and I indeed support the intent and the overall aspiration, Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
And the overall aspiration of what is contained in this particular settlement. There was a comment, and a very good comment made by the Greens with regards to the co-management model being adaptive and informed by evidence. And I'm very pleased that throughout the course of continuing to negotiate the finer points of this settlement, that a scoping study has been undertaken to look at what would be some of the priority projects, if you like, to take place that would help to improve the health and well-being of the river. Now, the proof of the pudding, I agree, is in the eating. It's in the practical implementation of co-management agreements and protocols that at the coalface will see riparian planting along our waterways, farmers obligated to fence off waterways and plant. We'll see our local people employed through opportunities that continue to lift the well-being of their local stream and tributaries into the river. That's where the proof of the pudding of this co-management model will be and should be. But can I reiterate that the opportunity through the Clean-up Fund to have a contestable fund that will be accessible by all peoples and many communities to show their effort along the waterway, I think is an exciting thing. It will build bridges rather than divide communities. It should incentivise people to look at the health and well-being of our waterway and say we want to continue to work to improve its health so that we can all benefit from that. Now, Paul Quinn said that the Fed Farmers' objections should be noted, and I note them too. But my response in many communities where those similar types of objections have come up is that at the end of the day, Fed farmers want certainty in who they're dealing with when it comes to the river. All I can say from that front is that this will provide certainty. It's just that the landscape's changed, that they're looking at different faces on the other side of the table, and so they should. And so they should. It is a sign of the times that Māori want to continue to be more involved in resource management because models of the past, quite frankly, have failed us. Failed the environment, failed our communities, and things need to change. Now, will that lead to higher costs? Because that is the other criticism from the territorial authorities. Will this model lead to higher costs for ratepayers? And there's no easy answer to that. But it is a legitimate concern that has been aired to negotiators. Waikato-Tainui are mindful of that, and in working through a real and practical approach to co-management as envisaged in this agreement, we would hope that over time that investment in the river is actually a better value cost contribution for everyone. And that investment, I think, has to be something that is clear and reported back onto communities. And those outcomes, again, should be demonstrated. Mr Speaker, can I also say in an overarching way about the intent of this settlement, I'm pleased that the opportunity for joint management agreements are ones that will see more iwi commissioners come onto the scene and hear resource consents. I would like to hope that my own private member's bill, which looks at elevating the recognition of iwi management plans in the planning cycle, will be one that would be supported across the House, because what that attempts to do is basically streamline this approach and apply it in a very broad context, and I think it's a positive way forward. Can I also say, just as a quick quip, with regards to issues raised regarding the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, we have been to historically, Waikato-Tainui have been to international forums to seek redress for Raupatu. Each and every time they were told, come back to your own parliament here in New Zealand, and we know that any gain that is going to be of value to Māori, to iwi, is going to be home where this parliament starts to look at making laws which take account of the visions and aspirations of what iwi want, what Māori want to see, which is the better management of our resources in our areas. So nothing gained overseas will actually deliver more than the tin tax here on the streets at home. Mr Speaker, the Kingitanga Accord Briefly, I think that the opportunity again for Waikato-Tainui